Why ignoring others is a superpower. Have you ever wondered why some people remain completely calm, no matter what insults or negativity are thrown at them, while others get triggered by the smallest remark? Why do some individuals seem untouchable, unaffected by external chaos, while most of us struggle to control our emotions? Here's a surprising truth: your reactions are not entirely yours. In fact, they have been conditioned by years of societal programming, emotional habits, and ego-driven impulses. But what if you could break free from that? What if you could master the art of non-reaction and develop an unshakable mind that no one could disturb? In today's discussion, we're going to explore the profound wisdom of Zen Buddhism and uncover the secret to true emotional freedom. You'll learn why reacting to negativity is a trap, how to shift your mindset to stay unaffected by conflict, and the exact steps to cultivate a deep sense of inner peace. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover has the power to transform your relationships, your energy, and ultimately, your entire life. The trap of reaction: why we lose energy unnecessarily. The greatest minds throughout history understood one fundamental truth: reaction is surrender. The moment we react emotionally, we are no longer in control, someone else is pulling the strings. Yet, from childhood, we are conditioned to defend, argue, and prove ourselves at every turn. But is that truly necessary? Think about the times you've been drawn into an argument, whether online or in person. Did winning that argument change anything significant? Did it bring peace to your heart, or did it just exhaust you? Most conflicts don't arise from a genuine search for truth. They come from ego, insecurity, and a desperate need for validation. But here's the irony: the person trying to provoke you isn't looking for the truth. They just want to control your reaction. Let's say you're walking down the street and someone yells an insult at you. You have two choices. First, you react, you yell back, your heart races, your mind fills with anger. You might spend the rest of the day replaying that moment, thinking of better comebacks, letting the negativity fester in your mind. Second, you stay still, you hear the insult, but you let it pass, like a breeze moving through the trees. You don't waste a single ounce of your energy on it. In the first scenario, you have handed over your energy to a stranger. Someone who likely doesn't even remember you an hour later has managed to ruin your peace. In the second scenario, you remain the master of yourself. The world constantly tests us with provocations, small ones, like a rude comment, and major ones, like betrayal or public humiliation. Those who react impulsively become slaves to these tests, forever trapped in a cycle of anger, frustration, and regret. But those who master their response gain an unshakable power, the power to remain untouchable. Many of history's greatest figures understood that mastery over reaction is mastery over life. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor of Rome, faced constant political betrayals, military threats, and personal losses, yet he remained calm. He wrote in his private journal, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Even when insulted or challenged, he did not react because he knew that reaction is weakness. The truly powerful do not need to defend themselves with words or emotional outbursts, their presence alone commands respect. Now, compare this with Napoleon Bonaparte, a brilliant strategist but a man enslaved by his emotions. His unchecked reactions led to his downfall. When Russia resisted him, his pride was wounded, so he invaded. That single decision cost him his empire. If he had paused, if he had not let his emotions dictate his strategy, history might have remembered him differently. And then there's Gautama Buddha, perhaps the greatest example of non-reaction. When verbally attacked, insulted, or questioned by skeptics, he simply smiled. Once, a man full of anger insulted him publicly, hoping to provoke a response. Instead of reacting, Buddha calmly asked, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man was stunned. He had no answer. The Buddha continued, in the same way, I do not accept your insults. They remain yours. This is the ultimate power, not to suppress emotions, but to transcend them. To see that reacting serves no purpose. To understand that the moment we respond in anger, we fall into someone else's game. Imagine your energy as a bucket of water. Every time you react impulsively, whether it's out of anger, frustration, or anxiety, it's like drilling a hole in that bucket. Slowly, your energy drains away. The more we react, the more exhausted we feel. That's why arguments leave us tired, social media debates leave us drained, and engaging with negativity leaves us empty. But the wise do not let their energy leak away. They guard it. They choose where to invest it. Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, said, if your opponent is temperamental, seek to irritate him. If he is arrogant, encourage his arrogance. If he is reactive, provoke him. The greatest warriors know that the one who reacts first loses. And this isn't just about war, it applies to everyday life. If you let people control your reactions, you have already lost. So, how do we stop falling into the trap of reaction? First, pause before you speak. When someone provokes you, take a deep breath. Count to 5. Ask yourself, does this deserve my energy? More often than not, the answer is no. Second, see through the illusion. Realize that most people provoking you do not care about the truth. They only care about control. The moment you react, you have given them what they want. Third, redirect your energy. Instead of responding with anger, use that energy for something productive. Go for a walk, meditate, write, or channel it into your goals. Every time you choose not to react, you gain more control over your life. Fourth, embody stillness. In Zen philosophy, there's a saying, be like a tree. When the wind blows, the leaves may rustle, but the trunk remains unmoved. Train yourself to be the trunk, not the leaves. Let the world move around you, but do not let it move you. Finally, ask yourself, what would a wise person do? Before reacting, think, would Buddha respond to this? Would a great emperor waste his time on this? If the answer is no, then neither should you. Life will always test you. People will try to provoke you, insult you, and challenge you. But remember this, your power lies in your response. You can either react impulsively and let them control you, or you can master yourself and become untouchable. The greatest strength is not in fighting every battle. It's in knowing which battles are beneath you. A Buddhist story, the gift of insults. The wisdom in this story is more than just a clever response, it is a masterful understanding of human nature. Insults, like poisoned arrows, only wound us if we allow them to pierce our skin. But what happens if we refuse to be a target? What if we step aside, letting the arrow pass harmlessly through empty space? History is filled with figures who mastered this art of non-reaction. Take Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher. Born into slavery, he endured cruelty and hardship beyond measure. His master once twisted his leg until it broke, yet Epictetus did not scream, did not curse. He simply stated, if you continue, it will break. And when it did, he did not rage, he accepted. To most, this might seem like weakness, but in reality, it was the highest form of strength. His master could harm his body, but he could not touch his mind. And that is where true power lies. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi, a man who faced endless opposition, violence, and humiliation, understood this power. When confronted by an angry mob demanding his response, he remained unmoved. When a British officer struck him, he did not fight back. And yet, who truly won that battle? The one who lashed out, or the one who refused to be brought down to that level? By not accepting the gift of hate, Gandhi robbed his oppressors of their power. We must ask ourselves, how often do we willingly accept the gifts of negativity? Every time we take offense, argue needlessly, or let someone else's words dictate our emotions, we are accepting something that was never ours to carry. Imagine if, instead, we learned to treat insults the way we treat a leaf floating down a river. We notice it, but we do not hold on to it. It drifts past, and we remain unchanged. The truth is, no one can humiliate you without your consent. No one can make you feel small unless you believe them. The power of an insult does not lie in the words themselves, but in your willingness to accept them. This is not just philosophy, it is a weapon. In a world that thrives on reaction, where social media arguments escalate within seconds, where people bait each other into endless cycles of outrage, the one who refuses to react holds all the power. Imagine the frustration of an attacker who cannot provoke a response. They expect anger, they expect pain, they expect retaliation, but instead, they receive nothing. Their arrows fall to the ground, their insults echo into silence. And in that silence, they are defeated. When we internalize this truth, we become untouchable. Words lose their power, and our peace becomes unshakable. Because in the end, the only insults that can hurt us are the ones we choose to accept. Why do we argue so much? Why do we argue so much? Why do we feel the need to defend our opinions, to prove others wrong, to fight over words that, in the grand scheme of things, hold no real power? If you stand at the edge of a still lake and throw a stone into its surface, ripples will spread outward, disturbing the calm. But eventually, the water returns to its natural state, serene, undisturbed, whole. It does not hold on to the impact. It does not cling to the disturbance. It simply allows it to pass, but we, as humans, do the opposite. We don't just react when provoked, we hold on to things. We replay insults in our minds. We stew over disagreements. We carry grudges like heavy stones, dragging them with us wherever we go. And for what? Most arguments are not about truth. They are about validation. About ego. Think about the last time you argued with someone. Did you do it to genuinely seek understanding, or did you do it to prove you were right? Did it bring you clarity, or did it only leave you more entangled in frustration? From the time we are children, we are taught that being right is important. We are rewarded for having the right answer in school, for proving our intelligence, for winning debates. Over time, this conditions us to equate self-worth with being correct. So when someone challenges our beliefs, we don't just see it as a different perspective, we see it as an attack on our identity. And the moment we feel threatened, we go into battle mode. We argue not to discover the truth, but to protect our sense of self. But let's ask a radical question: what if being right doesn't matter? What if you could simply walk away, without the need to convince anyone of anything? Marcus Aurelius, one of the wisest Roman emperors, wrote, "You always have the option of having no opinion." Imagine that, choosing silence. Choosing stillness. Choosing to let others be wrong, without needing to correct them. What would that feel like? Look at history's greatest thinkers. Did Socrates spend his days screaming at people, demanding they accept his philosophy? No, he simply asked questions and let people come to their own conclusions. Did the Buddha waste his breath arguing with those who mocked him? No, he responded with silence. With understanding, with wisdom. One day, a man came to insult the Buddha, shouting at him, hurling hateful words. But the Buddha simply smiled. When the man finally stopped, exhausted, the Buddha asked, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse to take it, to whom does the gift still belong?" The man hesitated. "To the one who offered it," he said. The Buddha nodded. "Exactly. And so it is with your words. I do not accept your insults. Therefore, they remain with you." Imagine if we lived like that. Imagine if, instead of reacting, we simply let things pass through us, like wind through an open field. How much energy would we save? How much peace would we gain? There is a simple truth in nature: a river never argues with a rock. It does not stop to push against it, to fight it, to prove that water is stronger than stone. It simply flows around it, continuing its journey. And in time, the rock erodes, not through force, but through quiet persistence. Now, think of your own life. Are you the river, flowing effortlessly toward your purpose? Or are you the person stopping at every rock, every insult, every argument, wasting time trying to prove something to people who may never listen? Imagine standing in a hall of mirrors. If you throw a punch, you will see fists raised against you in every reflection. If you smile, you will see countless smiles looking back at you. The world is no different. When you argue, when you fight, when you radiate anger, you receive anger in return. But when you choose peace, when you choose to let go, the world reflects that back to you. The truth is, an argument is like quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. The only way to win is to step away, to refuse to engage, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Because real strength is not in proving you are right. Real strength is in knowing you don't need to. How to break free? The power of non-reaction is not about weakness, it is about mastery. Not over others, but over yourself. It is the discipline of knowing that not every battle is worth fighting, not every insult is worth answering, and not every storm is worth braving. Most people go through life reacting to everything, as if they are mere puppets being controlled by external events. Someone offends them, they lash out. Someone disagrees with them, they argue. Someone looks at them the wrong way, they take it personally. But what if you could step outside of this cycle? What if you could watch the chaos of the world without being pulled into it? Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. And one of the strongest attachments we have is to our own ego. We attach to our opinions as if they define us, to our emotions as if they are permanent, and to our need for validation as if it is essential for survival. And so, when someone challenges our views, it is not just an intellectual disagreement, it feels like a personal attack. The ego feels threatened, and we react, not out of wisdom, but out of fear. Yet, the moment we react, we lose. Because to react is to be controlled, history has shown us that the most powerful individuals are not those who react impulsively, but those who master the art of stillness. Think of the great leaders, the spiritual teachers, the enlightened beings, they all understood this truth. Take Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor of Rome. Despite ruling over an empire filled with war, betrayal, and constant challenges, he maintained his inner peace. His philosophy was simple: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is the essence of non-reaction. The ability to remain calm, unshaken, even when the world around you is in turmoil. Imagine this: you are walking through a crowded marketplace, and a stranger yells an insult at you. Most people would turn, argue, defend themselves, or get angry. But what if you did nothing? What if you simply kept walking, as if the words had never even reached you? In that moment, you have demonstrated supreme power, not over the other person, but over yourself. Because the one who does not react cannot be controlled, this concept is not just philosophical, it has been tested in real-world situations. Mahatma Gandhi, one of the most influential figures in history, led an entire revolution through non-reaction. When faced with British colonial rule, he did not fight with weapons or hatred, he fought with silence. With peace, with unwavering resolve. He understood that violence only begets more violence, that reaction only feeds the enemy. Instead, he practiced satyagraha, non-violent resistance. And in the end, it was not the oppressors who won, but the one who refused to be provoked. Non-reaction does not mean passivity. It does not mean letting people walk over you or suppressing your emotions. It means choosing where to place your energy. It means understanding that not everything deserves your attention. Think of the ocean. It does not react to every wave, every gust of wind, or every passing storm. It remains vast, deep, and unmoved. The same should be true of your mind. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, once said, "The best fighter is never angry." Why? Because anger blinds us. It clouds judgment. It makes us easy to manipulate. When you are angry, you are predictable. You will lash out, you will waste your energy, you will make mistakes. But when you remain still, your opponent loses power over you. Consider a martial artist in battle. The untrained fighter reacts emotionally, swinging wildly, burning through his energy, leaving himself open to attack. The master, on the other hand, remains calm. He does not strike unless necessary. He does not move unless it serves a purpose. He does not allow his opponent to dictate his actions. This is the same principle that applies in life. When someone provokes you, they are trying to control you. But when you do not react, you deny them that control. Think about your own life. How many arguments have you engaged in that led to nothing? How many times have you lost sleep over words that, in the end, meant nothing? How much energy have you given to people who do not deserve it? The truth is, most conflicts are not about truth, but about ego. And the moment you realize this, you are free. Zen Buddhism teaches the concept of mushin, no mind. It is the state of pure awareness, where one is not swayed by emotion, not trapped by thought, not controlled by the external world. It is the highest level of mastery, where the mind flows like water, adapting to all situations but never being disturbed. This is the true power of non-reaction. So, the next time someone tries to anger you, pause. Breathe. Observe. Ask yourself, is this worth my peace? More often than not, the answer will be no. True strength is not in how loudly you argue, but in how little you allow others to disturb your inner stillness. Because in the end, the one who does not react is the one who truly wins. The art of non-response is not just about avoiding conflict, it is about mastering yourself. It is the ability to see beyond the moment, beyond the need for validation, and to step outside the cycle of reaction that keeps so many people trapped in endless battles. The world thrives on conflict. Everywhere you look, people are arguing, debating, defending, proving. But what if you could rise above it all? What if you could step back and see that most of these conflicts are meaningless, driven not by truth but by ego? Imagine standing in the middle of a storm. The winds rage, the thunder roars, and yet you remain still. This is the power of non-reaction. It is the power to be unmoved, to stand in your own truth without needing to prove anything to anyone. The person who can do this does not just survive life's challenges, they transcend them. Why do we argue? Most people believe that arguments are about discovering truth, about solving problems. But if that were true, why do so many arguments leave us feeling drained, frustrated, and misunderstood? The truth is, most arguments are not about clarity. They are about power. They are about one person trying to impose their will on another. And the moment you engage, you have already lost, because you have given the other person what they wanted, your energy. Think of the great thinkers of history. Did Buddha waste time arguing with those who insulted him? No. He remained silent, knowing that truth does not need to be defended. Did Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, lose himself in petty debates? No. He wrote, "You always have the power to have no opinion." He understood that true strength comes not from reacting but from choosing where to place your focus. Now ask yourself, how many times have you won an argument, only to realize that nothing actually changed? The other person did not truly listen. They did not walk away enlightened. They simply waited for their turn to speak, just as you did. So what was gained? Was your energy well spent? In today's world, people are addicted to reaction. Social media thrives on outrage. News thrives on controversy. Everywhere, people are waiting to be offended, eager to jump into battle. But the person who remains still, who does not engage, holds the true power. They are the ones who choose where their attention goes, rather than being pulled in every direction by others. Consider the story of Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated samurai. His greatest duels were not won by fighting harder but by fighting smarter. In one of his most famous battles, he deliberately arrived late, knowing that his opponent would grow restless and angry while waiting. By the time Musashi finally arrived, his opponent was so emotionally exhausted that he could not fight effectively. Musashi won without needing to exert himself fully. This is the power of patience. This is the power of mastering your own energy. The same applies to life. When someone insults you, provokes you, or challenges you, they are trying to pull you into their storm. But what happens if you do not step into it? What happens if you simply observe, without engaging? Their power dissolves. They become frustrated, because their attack has no effect. And in that moment, you win, not by force, but by control. Before responding to anything, pause. Count to 5. This simple habit disrupts the automatic cycle of reaction. It gives you a moment to decide, is this worth my energy? When you must respond, do so in a way that gives nothing away. Simple phrases like, I understand your perspective, or, that's an interesting way to see it, or, let's talk about this later, do not concede, but they also do not add fuel to the fire. They disarm the person looking for a fight. Most of the negativity directed at you is not actually about you. People carry their own burdens, their own frustrations, and they project them onto others. When someone lashes out, ask yourself, is this about me, or is this about them? More often than not, it has nothing to do with you. A well-placed joke can neutralize even the most aggressive person. Have you ever seen someone try to start an argument, only for the other person to laugh and walk away? It destroys their momentum. Humor removes the tension, leaving the other person with nothing to hold on to. True power is not found in dominance over others, it is found in mastery over yourself. The ability to stay calm when others are angry. The ability to walk away when others want to fight. The ability to choose where your energy goes, rather than being pulled in every direction by those who seek to provoke you. So the next time someone challenges you, insults you, or tries to drag you into a pointless debate, remember this, you do not have to engage. You do not have to respond. You have the power to rise above, to remain still while the storm rages around you. Because in the end, the person who does not react is the one who truly holds control. The ultimate lesson, cultivating an unshakable mind. To cultivate an unshakable mind is not merely to suppress reaction but to transcend it entirely, to reach a level where the storms of the world pass through you without leaving a trace. This is not apathy, nor is it weakness. It is the highest form of strength, the kind that cannot be provoked, manipulated, or disturbed by external forces. This strength does not come from domination or control over others but from complete sovereignty over oneself. Imagine walking through a crowded marketplace where merchants are shouting for your attention, trying to sell you their goods. If you engage, if you stop at every stall, you become entangled. But if you walk through with complete detachment, no one can pull you in. The same is true in life. Every insult, every provocation, every attempt to disturb your peace is just another merchant in the marketplace. You decide whether or not to engage, but why do we react in the first place? Why is it so difficult to ignore the noise? The answer lies in the ego. The ego craves validation. It thrives on recognition. And the moment someone challenges it, the ego feels threatened. It compels you to respond, to defend, to prove. But in doing so, you become a puppet, controlled by the strings of external forces. This is why, in Buddhist and Stoic philosophy alike, the dissolution of ego is seen as the key to inner peace. The moment you stop identifying with the fragile self that needs to be right, you become untouchable. The moment you realize that no insult can diminish your true self, you become free. There is a story about the legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi, one of the greatest warriors in history. He was undefeated in battle, not just because of his skill with the sword, but because of his mastery over his own mind. It is said that one day, as he was traveling, a rival warrior insulted him, trying to provoke a fight. Any other samurai would have drawn their sword immediately, for honor demanded it. But Musashi simply smiled and walked away. His companion was shocked. "Why did you let him insult you?" he asked. Musashi replied, "If someone hands you a poisoned gift, and you refuse to take it, to whom does the poison belong?" This echoes the wisdom of the Buddha: what is offered to you is only yours if you accept it. This is why non-reaction is not a passive act but an act of immense power. The ability to remain unshaken in the face of insult or conflict is a sign of true mastery. But how do we cultivate this in our daily lives? How do we move from knowing this truth to living it, detached from the need to be right? One of the biggest traps in life is the obsession with being right. We argue, we fight, we exhaust ourselves trying to prove a point that, in the grand scheme of things, may not even matter. Ask yourself, what do I truly gain by proving someone else wrong? Does it make me happier? Does it bring me peace? The reality is that most arguments are not about truth, they are about ego. The next time you feel the urge to argue, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this for clarity, or am I doing this for validation? If it's the latter, let it go. See insults for what they are. An insult is only painful if it hits a wound. If you are secure in yourself, no insult can touch you. Imagine someone calling you a fool in a language you don't understand. Would you feel offended? Of course not. The words carry no meaning to you. But the moment you attach meaning to an insult, the moment you allow it to define you, you give it power. The key is to recognize that most insults are projections. People speak from their own pain, their own insecurities. When you see this clearly, you stop taking things personally, master the art of non-reaction. Non-reaction is not about suppressing emotion, it is about transcending it. It is the difference between a glass of water and the ocean. Drop a stone into a glass of water, and the entire surface is disturbed. Drop a stone into the ocean, and it remains still. The goal is to become the ocean. This requires practice. The next time someone tries to provoke you, try this: instead of reacting immediately, take a deep breath. Observe your emotions without acting on them. Let the moment pass like a cloud drifting in the sky. Over time, this practice builds resilience, and you become untouchable. Realize that true power lies in stillness. There is an old Zen saying, "The strongest tree is not the one that resists the wind, but the one that bends and does not break." The world is full of people who waste their energy in unnecessary battles. They fight over opinions, over insults, over things that, a week from now, will not matter. But the wisest among us know that stillness is power. When you refuse to be provoked, you conserve your energy. You direct it toward things that truly matter. And as a result, you become more powerful than those who lash out impulsively. The ultimate transformation, shifting the energy around you. Something remarkable happens when you embody this wisdom. Not only do you change, but the people around you begin to change as well. Those who once tried to provoke you stop trying. They realize their words have no effect, and they lose interest. You stop attracting conflict because you no longer participate in it. Over time, the chaos around you diminishes, and you find yourself surrounded by peace, not because the world has changed, but because you have. This is the true power of ignoring negativity. It is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is mastery. It is the ability to walk through life untethered, unshaken, untouched by the noise of the world. When you reach this state, you are no longer merely existing, you are truly free. Imagine living each day unshaken, no longer a slave to anger, frustration, or the need to prove yourself. Imagine the peace of knowing that no one can control your emotions but you. That is the true power of non-reaction, and now, it's your turn. Starting today, make the choice to reclaim your energy. The next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Breathe. Observe. And instead of reacting, let it go. Watch how the power shifts. Watch how your inner peace remains untouched. We are building a community of mindful warriors, people who seek wisdom, not conflict. Join us by subscribing and sharing your journey in the comments below. How will you apply this lesson in your life? Let's support each other in mastering the art of inner stillness. True strength isn't in fighting battles, it's in knowing which ones aren't worth your energy. Let's cultivate that strength together.